Hello again for the second part of my Glastonbury podcast. It's now the Monday afterwards. I'm back in London. You may be able to hear from my voice that I'm quite hoarse. I can't. I felt better. I'm not as you know from listening to this podcast, I'm not as hard living as I used to be. But yeah, a couple of nights in a field with very little sleep and lots of fun and dancing and partying has left me feeling a little ragged around the edges, but that is okay. And I've got a really good reason why I wanted to record this podcast, actually, because as you hopefully heard from my last podcast at Glastonbury, it was brilliant. It was just an uplifting weekend. And one of the interesting things is that you probably know from this podcast that I wear an Oura ring. So this is a tracker ring that tracks all sorts of things, steps and exercise, but also heart rate variability, sleep, temperature, that sort of thing. And I obviously did a huge amount of steps and walking over the weekend because Glastonbury is very spread out, and I know about half of the people who listen to this podcast are in the States, so it's pretty much the biggest festival here in the UK, but the land is big that it's on as well. There's over 200,000. I think they sell 220,000 tickets, but that is not including anyone who wants to bring kids under 13 can bring them for free, so it's a massive amount of people. So there's a lot of walking involved. But the reason I wanted to record this podcast is I got back last night, and being a bit of a biohacking geek, I checked my Oura Ring stats for the weekend. I hadn't checked them, I'd had it in airplane mode all weekend. And despite the fact, firstly, my sleep was absolutely appalling. And by the way, I'm walking around London, so sorry if you can hear noises of someone taking the bins out or cars and that sort of thing. My sleep was appalling. I had 4 hours 50 sleep on the Friday night and 4 hours 30 sleep on the Saturday night. On an airbed which was slowly deflating as I slept, and a sleeping bag that felt like a straitjacket. And it was quite a relief to wake up and say, all right, let's just knock that sleep on the head for the night and try again tomorrow night. But what was incredible was my heart rate variability score was massive, absolutely huge. Sort of best ever. Over the 2 nights, way over 100, and it normally is not that. And I'm now walking past someone who's trimming a hedge, I think. Certainly some sort of gardening going on. There we go. So I thought that was quite interesting. Despite the fact I'd slept so badly, my heart rate variability scores are hugely high. And if you don't track your heart rate variability, that is one of the best indicators of wellness, health, stress levels or relaxation levels. It really is an important parameter for how you're feeling and how your body is. Not how you're feeling, how your body is, because it doesn't lie. You might have 4 hours 50 of sleep, but look at your heart rate variability. And my heart rate variability scores were so high at this festival for the weekend. So I've got 3 potential reasons why that might be. The first one, the most likely, I was just doing all the things that our ancestors used to do in the middle of summer, and it's just our bodies can't help but react in a positive way. Just like when we stare into a campfire, it makes us feel better than when we stare into a screen late at night. When you're in the middle of summer doing lots of exercise, dancing, hanging out with friends, listening to good music, outside all weekend, lots of fresh air, sleeping outside as well, appreciating nature, relaxing, eating good food. I'm not sure about having a couple of drinks, but I'm not sure if that was something that helps with heart rate variability. But all of those things are my most likely scenario for why my heart rate variability at Glastonbury was so high. And I'm aware that this is sort of quite an odd juxtaposition, Glastonbury and biohacking, but I think it's a relevant one because something's happened to make my body react in a hugely positive way over the weekend. Now the second possibility of what it could be is the fact that there's this is slightly more hippy dippy. My reasons get more and more out there as we go down the line. The second reason is that after COVID, it was just so incredible to be around people and feel that sense of community. And it really is a very loving, kind vibe. Everyone's just so nice to each other. Being surrounded by all that love and kindness, perhaps that really helped with heart rate variability. And that's actually less hippy-dippy than it might think, because there's plenty of science and research around the effect of loving, healing vibes and people actually healing. You may have heard some of the research based around when prayer is directed towards people who are trying to heal from a major illness or an operation. Or I think I mentioned on the podcast a few times before how a Qigong master sent healing energy to a petri dish with cancer cells in it, and the cancer cells diminished in size to nothing, but the other 3 petri dishes the cancer cells grew that he didn't send the healing vibes to. So that's my second scenario. And then my third reason for why my heart rate variability might have been so high is that Paul McCartney came on stage on Saturday night and played his songs, and we were there. And at one point he said, I just want to remind you guys that we are on this incredibly magical place where the ley lines pass through. And apologies for my Paul McCartney impression. But there are ancient energetic lines called ley lines that are deep within the earth that pass through Glastonbury, and these energetic magnetic lines are supposed to have magical healing properties. Now, this is my least likely explanation for why my heart rate variability might have been high over the weekend, but maybe I'm open-minded enough. I don't know much about ley lines, but I know there are certain places that have an energetic charge that you can't quite explain. And maybe that was why my heart rate variability was so high. Anyway, it's done my stats a whole lot of good. That's it for my Glastonbury debrief. It's the morning after, and I have to say, I do feel pretty rough. But that said, I'm strolling to a coffee shop to do a bit of work with a colleague of mine. I'm going to make it as relaxed a day as possible, inspired by the fact that I've had the most wonderful weekend. And actually, we picked up my son and then got back last night, and he went to bed. And I put the telly on and I watched Glastonbury on Sunday night, and I watched a bit of Elbow. And I have to confess, a tear popped into my eye at what a great weekend it was. And then I thought, I've really lost it now. As always, thank you for listening to Zestology. Thank you to my podcast partners this month, Magnesium Breakthrough. Go to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology to get 10% off. It is well worth it, and I'll probably need a bit extra of that today because I was quite achy. I felt more achy than when I did the Yorkshire Three Peaks Challenge last month, to be quite honest, after walking around Glastonbury for a couple of days. So magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, all 7 bioavailable forms of magnesium in one tablet that is just really good for sleep. Mind you, it doesn't help if you're camping in a field at 4 o'clock in the morning with an airbed that is slowly deflating, but it does help with a lot of things. So that's Mag Breakthrough, and also, of course, Sensate. And if you go to getsensate.com/Tony Wrighton, and on the Sensate site, if you use the code Tony, it's either Tony or Tony10. I'm pretty sure it's Tony. You will get a nice discount off. And that is well worth it as well. I also probably need that today as well. I've already meditated once this morning. Probably do a Sensate session this afternoon when I get home. But please do show the Sensate people some love, because that's a brilliant a brilliant brand as well. And we've got something special coming for Sensate in July. So I won't tell you about that now, but that is coming in July. And I know I mentioned Sensate in the last podcast briefly as well, but that is coming in July. So we will tell you more about that in a few days' time. I need to hydrate, so I'm off. Thank you for listening to this part 2 Glastonbury podcast recorded on the debrief on the way home. And I bumped into my neighbour who actually performed at Glastonbury. He's in the band McFly, and I bumped into him this morning, and he was just buzzing as much as I was. And he just said, and I said, you know, what's it like? I said, well, Paul McCartney played a lot of new stuff, which we were slightly disappointed by. But I said, I sort of get it, you know. I mean, songs that you wrote in your 20s, maybe you're prouder of songs that you've written more recently. And he said, mate, the buzz never goes of performing a hit and seeing the whole crowd jumping up and down. And he may have had a slightly different experience to me in the VIP area, but he was loving it just as much as I was. So there you go. Thank you for listening to my 2 Glastonbury podcasts. I hope you've enjoyed them. I'll be back with a non-Glastonbury based podcast next week. And until then, have a good one and have a great week.